Hey everybody, you're listening to the Smoke Meat Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Pittman. We are brought to you today by Joe's Underground in Augusta, Georgia, at the corner of 8th and Broad. They're in the bottom of the Lamar building. Such a great place. I love going to Joe's. Jeremy and the gang always make me feel welcome there. They've got great food, great drinks, just great people all around. You gotta love going to Joe's. Right now on their Facebook page, Joe's Underground, they have got the coolest t-shirts around. You gotta get one. You have to get one now to help support them. It's Joe's Underground on Facebook. Corner of 8th and Broad in Augusta, Georgia, in the bottom of the Lamar building. Today my guest is the host of Perched Sports Talk, Jon Shearer. Great guy. We're going to hit a little bit of everything today. So without further ado, we're going to kick this pig. Yeah, here we go on Smoke Meat. Hey, how's it going today, Jon?
It's going pretty well.
Good deal, man. I've had a chance to listen to some of your podcasts. Perched On is freaking awesome. I mean, you've got everything.
Yeah, we do. Well, it didn't really start out that way. When we started out, it was a podcast that, well, it was just two of us when we started, and neither of us really knew what we were doing. If you go back and listen to the first episode, it was pretty bad. I went back and listened to it before, and I won't listen to it again because it was that bad. But we started about 5 years ago, and it's grown since then. And like you said, we have everything. So we've talked to basically everybody you can in the business for the Baltimore Orioles, because we're kind of tied in with them, and the Hershey Bears for minor league hockey, and pro wrestling. Pro wrestling kind of branches out into a million different ways. So we've talked to basically everybody in there, and we're going to be adding another branch here soon. So to stay tuned for that. And then we also have the NFL one, Perched on the Gridiron, as well. We've kind of talked a little bit of everybody in that regard, agents and former players and current players and GMs and people like that. So we've kind of done just about everything we can. Talked to just about everybody we can.
Oh yeah, the wrestlers. I think me and you had talked some. That's what I grew up with. Georgia Championship Wrestling with Gordon Soley. And I looked over some of your things, man. I'm like, holy crap, he has interviewed some of the greats.
Yeah, and we have a lot more that we haven't put out there yet. We have probably a laundry list of those former guys that we just haven't gotten a chance to post yet. We're going to post when the time is right. We get our video and, all that good fun stuff up and running.
Man, I'm looking forward to it. I've already subscribed because, this is awesome. This is up my wheelhouse with old wrestling and stuff.
Yeah, we got to talk to, last night we talked to Barry Norman, former WCW publicist. He was pretty cool. He knows Sting and Sid. Well, he knew Sid Vicious.
Yeah.
Sting and guys like that. And we also talked to Nikita Breznikov last night. He was from the 70s, from the WWF, and he managed Nikolai Volkov back in the 70s. So we just got done talking to them last night. They were both really cool guys. So
yeah, cool deal, man. I just remember, I still like wrestling, but I like I say, I'm an old guy. I go back to my old days. I'm the guy that doesn't have new music on my iPod. I've got all the old stuff. And, I just remember the 70s and the 80s. I remember, Mr. Wrestling 1 and 2 and the Assassins, Tommy Wildfire Rich, all these guys, and they paved the way for what we've got today. And not saying today's any worse or any better, it's just different to me.
Yeah, today is a little bit different. And I think the thing that's changed wrestling, and we talked about this last night on both of our interviews that we had, the internet, the social media, and the fact that there's dirt sheets and things like that to kind of leak what is going to happen. You didn't have that when I was growing up in the 90s watching wrestling since I was like 2. You didn't have that. Even early 2000s, you really didn't have that. And then once the mid 2000s and 2010s and stuff like that came about, and the internet got bigger and bigger, and social media got bigger, everybody was able to just get their hands on everything that's going to happen. I mean, we knew Monday morning that what the announcement on Raw was going to be, that Becky Lynch was going to announce that she's pregnant. Years ago, 20 years ago, you wouldn't have known that. You wouldn't have known that until it happened on the show. It wasn't a thing, and that kind of, I'm not going to say it ruined wrestling, but it's definitely changed it to the point where, I mean, I don't watch it as much as I did whenever I was growing up. Mm-hmm. And it's not that, I don't know, it's just not the same. But I still love wrestling, but I'm more of an AEW guy than WWE now. Mm-hmm. But I was hardcore WWF/WWE growing up.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember when I was a kid, my dad took me down to Bell Auditorium one night in Augusta, Georgia. It wasn't a huge arena. It was what we had, And Mr. Wrestling number 1 and 2 were wrestling the Assassins. Both teams wore masks. You never saw them. And I got to see one of the Assassins get unmasked up at live, and that was just the coolest thing. Now, if somebody wears a mask, you can pretty much just hit Google and you know them. You know what they look like. You saw them in 3rd grade, and here's where they live, and you know everything. Back then, we just knew that we were part of something. And that, it kind of takes some of the mystique away now.
Yeah, that's how I felt kind of when Kane wore his mask the first time that he had his mask. That was a mystery, and all of us were like, who is this guy? But we also didn't want him to be unmasked, because when he became unmasked, it took away the mystery of Kane, and for me, it kind of ruined his character. It wasn't the same in my eyes once they unmasked him and you got to see his face. It wasn't the same. And yeah, so that's how I feel. Yeah.
But I tell you, and being from the South, another sport I love, I haven't got to watch it in a few years. The rule changes have kind of messed it up for me. Got to go with some NASCAR.
Yeah.
But the old NASCAR is what I like.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years since I watched NASCAR as well. Much like wrestling, growing up, I watched a lot of NASCAR, and I kind of fell out of love with it probably the past 10 years or so. And like you said, the rule changes have kind of turned me away from it as well. But man, I really, really enjoyed that growing up, and I think that their tweaking of the rules and things like that kind of messed it up for me as well.
Yeah, because I remember when it was basically go fast, turn left. The faster you can make your car, God bless you. If you can hold it on the track, go. And if you can't, hope you got insurance. You're a goner. And yeah, while that was dangerous, I'm all up for some safety in sports, because it's a game at the end of the day. You don't want anybody to die for it. But at the same time, it's freaking NASCAR. I understand restrictor plates, and I understand, all the safety things. That's cool. I got no beef with that at all. I want these guys to live forever. But the way they're doing the points now, it's just, I don't get it. After a certain part of the season, what incentive does somebody have to keep racing other than just keep their sponsor dollars?
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. And when they started this whole playoff thing, for me, it was super confusing. It was like trying to follow it and understand it. And I don't know, it took a while to really get the grasp of it. And I was like, I really don't like this. Like, I liked it back when I growing up watching NASCAR, it was just whoever came in first, they came in first.
Yeah.
It wasn't any of this, well, you get to go to the playoffs. No, it was, if you weren't better than the other guy, then you just did not win. And I prefer that. I think that shows the better driver. I understand playoffs are important for sports, but NASCAR, I feel like it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, I mean,
look, what I'm saying?
Yeah, look at Richard Petty and Dale Earnhardt. Yeah, I agree. People will say, well, we want a fair shot at winning. Well, you want a fair shot at winning, be a better driver than Dale Earnhardt or Richard Petty were. You know, you got to work at it. It's just like a participation trophy, you know. Okay, we're going to hobble them so you have a chance. No, you need to work your ass off and beat them. That's what it is. You know, it's a game. And,
yeah, I agree.
I can tell I'm getting old because things have changed so much. You know, baseball. You know, I live 20 miles from SunTrust Park, you know, where I could go watch the Braves. I can't even tell you who's on them right now. That's the bad part. I like the early 80s, you know, the Dale Murphys, you know, the Phil Necros, all them. You know, I love
Chipper Jones, and the 90s, the Chipper Jones and all them as well, the John Smoltz and
yeah, you know, and now it's just I just can't get into it anymore. I loved it when athletes were examples. They understood, okay, I've worked my tail off to get to this level. I don't need to be a thug. I don't need to stay in trouble with the law. I don't need to do this and that. I need to be an example to these kids that look up to me, because kids do. And they took that role seriously. You know, we've still got some that do, but we got a lot of them that are just, I'm here for the money. And I understand that because Daddy wants to get paid too. But it's a responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, I understand both sides of the argument when it comes to athletes, because I always hear people say, well, you know, they're just athletes, they don't deserve that much. Well, I mean, if we were athletes, I mean, we'd all want as much as we could get, because who doesn't want as much as they could get at their job, regardless if you're an athlete or whatever you are?
Yeah.
Who doesn't want to make as much as humanly possible? I mean, that's just the nature of the business, the nature of any job. You want to make as much as they'll pay you. So I don't blame athletes for that.
Yeah.
What I do knock athletes for is when I see tweets or they comment on TV or whatever saying, well, I got to provide for my family. That I have a problem with, because you can go 1 year, make your $10 million, and you could be perfectly fine. You could retire after 1 year, make $10 million, and be fine the rest of your life and never have a problem.
Yeah.
You can live off $10 million. So when an athlete says, well, I'm just trying to look out for my family, like, bull crap. I get what you're saying, but, you know, guys like you and me make, you know, if we make 30 or 40 or 50,000 or whatever, like, we're trying to provide for our family, because, you know, we have bills to pay, and if we don't show up to our job, we don't get to live where we live, and we don't get to, you know, we don't get to have food, and we don't get to provide for our family, and they don't have a place, and all that jazz.
Yeah.
It's not the same for an athlete. If like I said, if they work 1 year, you get 10 or 20 million or whatever, you're fine. Like, I could work my entire life and not make that $10 million, which is okay. It just, as an athlete, I just don't like when they say, I'm trying to provide for my family, because you already did. And there's nothing wrong with making more, but just don't put it that way. You know, it comes off as, we see through your BS.
Yeah,
know?
don't poor mouth me if you're making over $1 million, you know.
Yeah, and, I mean, good for you. Good for you, and that's great. Like I said, make as much as you can. But, you know, if you want more money on the team, you know, don't make the excuse that, oh, I'm just trying to provide for my family. Say you know, hey, I've done really well. I deserve this much because of my performance, and that's okay. But don't give us that other BS, because we all know that that's just a lie, and that's the only part that gets me.
Yeah,
Other than that, those guys can make whatever they want. That's cool with me.
Yeah, you know, if you're making $10 billion off of me, you know, I want as much as I'm going to be able to get. You know, that's like I said, that's human nature. I can dig that one. And I don't know. I guess I'm just getting old.
Yeah, I mean, I'm old school as well. I'm almost 30, but I'm old school as well. I prefer the old 80s movies and shows and music and 90s stuff, and you know, the way it was when I was growing up, and even before I was alive. Like, I prefer that stuff.
Yeah.
And just, I don't know, like, I like technology, and I dive into technology myself, obviously with podcasting, but at the same time, like, I enjoyed growing up without technology, because if we could go back to that time when, growing up without all this internet stuff where it didn't ruin wrestling and we could just, you know what I mean? You'd sit down at a table and you actually have a conversation with your family. You don't get distracted by your phone buzzing 14 times at dinner.
Yeah.
And you look over every time and your friend or wife or whoever's with you trying to eat dinner with you, it's like, hey, turn off your phone or you're both looking down at your phone. I enjoy technology, but I'm old school like that. So,
yeah. I like technology, but I remember, nowadays kids, like I say, they're always on something with a battery. I remember being a kid and building ramps with my bike. Nothing fancy, just something to jump. And I'm so amazed that I've lived to be this old. Some of the stuff I did as a kid.
Yeah.
But I do love technology. Had I had technology like this when I was a kid, I would probably be dead by now. Yeah.
Yeah, same here. And I'm like I said, I'm not opposed to technology. It's great. It's a blessing and a curse. But I'm glad I grew up without it before it came about. I think right about when I was graduating high school is when it really started to take off. Mm-hmm. And it was nice growing up without it because, went outside and played in the dirt and played, my friends and I would play over summers. We'd play baseball every day from 8 in the morning to 5:30 at night.
Yeah.
Every day we'd play baseball over the summer. And all 10 of us would just get together. Didn't have cell phones. We had, the cord phone or whatever. But we'd get together every single day, and from 8 in the morning till 5:30 at night, baseball. Down to the baseball field, we'd go down there, and we'd all play and, have a good time and go have lunch and then come back and play more and be all dirty and, go do it again the next day. That just doesn't happen. Maybe it does in some parts, but I don't feel like that happens like it did when I was growing up where kids were outside gathering to play a baseball game or play a basketball game or football game or whatever. Yeah. I don't think that that's quite as prevalent as it was, whenever I was a kid. And that's a shame because I think kids are really missing out on those type of things. Because believe me, I hold those type of memories very, very near and dear to my heart. They're very fond in my mind.
Oh, yeah. And, I remember, like I say, we'd go out, we would build ramps, we would play baseball all day. We'd have kicks where that's what we did for weeks on end. And then it'd be time for football, so we'd go out there and play football. And, whatever season it was, where we were out fishing or we were out hunting, we were always out doing something.
Yep.
And like I say, there wasn't any cell phones. And, if I wanted to find out if my buddy was home, I could probably call him, but maybe not. May not answer the phone, and you got to get on your bike and ride over to the house and see if they're there. And, everybody got a lot more exercise. And I am not the exercise king now, that's for sure.
And the only time that we would come back inside was, if we had water guns or something dumb like that,
Oh, yeah.
We'd come back in, fill them up, or come back in for lunch or dinner or whatever, or take a break and then go back outside. But we weren't inside really at all. Like when we were with our friends and even with my brothers, we'd mainly be outside doing, like you said, doing something, playing some sort of sport or, playing some sort of kid thing outside. But we didn't watch TV. I mean, we watched TV growing up, but you know what I mean? We didn't really hover over that. It was mainly things that I think that kids should be doing, outside things, getting their hands dirty and experiencing things like that you really treasure once you grow up and look back at that stuff.
Exactly. Exactly. We know talking about tech, I got to geek out a little bit here. What kind of tech are you using for your podcast? What do you produce with?
So what kind of program we use?
Now, what kind of, mics and everything? I want details, man.
I have your basic, basic microphones. I mean, we don't have a lot of revenue for our podcast personally, so we just kind of have, at least on my end, I only have basic, the basic equipment until we like have sponsors and revenue and stuff like that come in, and then we turn money like that into equipment. I know my co-host, he has some pretty good equipment, but on my end, I only have like basic microphones, and we use Skype. I use my phone to record because like I said, I don't necessarily have the money to go out and buy the equipment. So I mean, if we get sponsors and things like that, then the only place that money would go is to better the equipment, to better our show, so it sounds better for everybody else. And for me, it's a pride thing because my podcast is something that I take very serious and I care a lot about. And it's not just some podcasts. There's a million podcasts out there, but for me, it's something that I plan on turning it into a sports network one day, like a real sports network. I hope that becomes a thing eventually. So, baby steps, I guess.
Hey, from what I've listened to, sounds fine. Sounds just fine.
We try. We do our best with what we got, and I mean, if that's what you do, whatever you got, you just make the best of it, and you try and make sure you're not really around too much other sound, whether it be kids or whatever. You try and make sure you're kind of isolated whenever you do your shows, and yeah.
Well, that's the neat thing about podcasting is it's so easy to do now, and you don't have to spend thousands of dollars to do it the right way. You've listened to mine, you hear the quality of my sound. I'm the cheapest person on the face of the earth. I mean, the Grand Canyon was formed because I dropped a nickel in a hole. And but when we go off there, I'll actually send you a list of the stuff that I'm using that for next to nothing. You've got a pretty good sound, but like I say, I can teach you upgrades that are next to nothing that are great. Yeah. And you will love. Makes things so much easier.
Yep. And like I said, I mean, when we started 5 years ago, I mean, we didn't have a whole lot. We still don't have a whole lot equipment-wise, but we just kind of made the best of it. And, that's all you can do with podcasts. I mean, when we started, to give you a perspective of how, I mean, our Baltimore Orioles show isn't as popular as it once was because some of our loyal followers, they just kind of, how it is with like social media. People, they come in and they listen, and then one day they're just not there anymore for whatever reason. But are you familiar with the Dan Le Batard show?
I am.
Okay. Well, when we started in 2015, podcasts weren't really like big yet. They were on the verge of it, but they weren't really big yet. They weren't like something everybody had. Well, the Dan Le Batard show had a podcast on Podbean, which is where we mainly host our shows. And after about a year of podcasting, we went and looked at our downloads. Our downloads were pretty good in the first year, and I didn't think our downloads were great, but I thought they were pretty good. And I went and compared them to other podcasts, and I was like, well, I listened to the Dan Le Batard show, and I was like, oh, I'll check out their downloads. And ours were probably like 3,000 or 4,000 less than theirs after we had done ours for a year. Our downloads were right behind theirs, and they're produced by ESPN. Yeah. Now, granted, this was before the Dan Le Batard show, like, started putting their podcasts on all these other sites and ESPN and stuff, and it was mainly Podbean is where I found them. But their Podbean, we only had a couple thousand less than they did download-wise. So we were competing with them with downloads. And they obviously don't know who we are because they're on ESPN and we're just some podcast. But back then, our numbers were just about similar to theirs for being some new podcast, and they had theirs out longer than us. And we had ours out only a year at that point in 2016, and we were competing with them. for downloads wise. So, I mean, that that was before interviews and stuff like that. It was just kind of doing the show for the fun of it, and now it's kind of turned more into like a serious thing. But back then it was just kind of like me and my buddy wanted to talk about the Orioles, the Baltimore Orioles, and it turned into something serious now. But back then it was just we did it for the fun of it, and I thought that's one of my marks is getting to compete with the Dan Le Batard show. Even though they'll never know us, but like comparing their numbers, and we were that close to like having more downloads than them. For me, that's something I'm pretty proud of because I'm a big Dan Le Batard fan.
Yeah, I think that's pretty awesome. And that just goes to prove it's not about the money you put into it. It's about the heart and the content, and you got to have what people want to hear. And that's the great thing about this because, well, yeah, I could pour thousands and thousands of $1,000s into this thing. If I'm not saying, talking about what people want to listen to, nobody's listening to this.
Yeah.
And that's, one thing I've evolved with mine over, at the beginning, whenever I would do some interviews, I would use my radio voice. And, hi there, so you're from Indiana, or so you're this. And it sounds canned, but now I've just gotten to where, okay, it's two guys talking on the phone with a bunch of people listening. And that works because that's my style. It's comfortable and people respond to it because it's real.
Yeah. I mean, to piggyback off of that, I mean, it's organic. It's you. I mean, if you stick to, like you said, like what works for you, so that works for you is just having a conversation, and not doing the radio voice, and then people are going to open up to that more than, you know what I mean? Like you said, they see through the radio voice or whatever. So if people see through, phonies and stuff like that on like podcasts or videos or whatever. People see through that stuff, and there's people that still stick with them. But people like you and I, like when we see like the phony people on a network or whatever, like we're like, that guy's a bunch of full of shit. And we know it. Like people like you and I mean, I know there's people out there that don't really care about that stuff, but like I'm like old school. Like I care about I care about journalism. I love the Dan Le Batard show, and I like how they're serious about their journalism, but at the same time they still joke, and that's kind of their thing and stuff, and I respect that. But they're not like, they're true. Like that is who they are, and they stick to what works for them, and no, I just don't like the fake journalists out there and the fake things. You know what I mean? Like the phonies. I like talking to people like you that, it's organic. It's just natural to have a conversation with you. Instant chemistry with just chatting with you, and I like chatting with people like that.
Yeah. Hey, when I was getting ready for this, you know the sports that I do. Like I say, we've talked about them. I could have sat and looked up the Braves stats from spring training this year and everything in the world and been like, so, Joe Fred, he threw for 3 touchdowns last year. And people are going to know I'm full of it because anybody that knows me knows I like sports, but I'm not eat up with them. Now, my wife, Georgia Bulldog football, whoo, that woman gets passionate about her dogs. Let me tell you, my kids will not sit in the living room when my wife is watching football. She is very animated.
Don't tell your wife who I'm a fan of. She might not like me.
Oh man, who are you a fan of?
I'm a Gators fan, and Georgia and Florida don't mix well together.
I drove across that campus one time and I had to roll my windows up and speed up because they kept trying to throw diplomas in my car.
I mean, it's better. It's better than Alabama. Alabama's. I can't stand Alabama.
Oh man!
I prefer Georgia over Alabama any day.
But they've done research and found out.
I loathe Alabama.
They found out that the toothbrush was actually invented at University of Alabama. Yeah, if it'd been anywhere else, it'd be a teeth brush. Yeah, but you know what? Florida wears orange.
Why is that?
So they can go to the game on Saturday, go hunting on Sunday, and go back to work picking up trash on Monday.
Their stadium's pretty nice. I mean, I got to do a tour of it about 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. My wife and I went down to Orlando. And obviously, being a Gators fan, she was like, do you want to go and drive there? And I was like, yeah, sure. And went and visited the stadium, and it was really nice. I mean, for me, it was a dream come true, and I got to see the national championship trophies and all that good fun stuff. And it was for me, it was a blast. So if you ever get to visit Georgia Stadium yourself, if you haven't already, I would say go.
I used to live in Athens, man.
Like for me, I mean, I don't watch college football as much as I did, a couple years ago. I don't have cable. I haven't had since I've been married for about 6 years now. I haven't had cable since since I've been married. Like, we just don't do cable. But yeah. I mean, I still catch sporting events whenever I can, or stream them on my phone or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
But I just don't get around to watching as much college football. But I must say, like, if you're a fan of a team, a college team, at least for the Gators, I got to go in and do a tour for free. They don't charge. Some do. Gators don't, which is really nice because, I mean, you're already traveling down there. Who wants to pay more money for a tour? And I would say checking out your stadium, whoever's a fan of their team, because it was like a dream come true. I mean, you don't get to do that with professional sports unless you pay. Typically, they typically make you shell out a good bit of money, but college is a little bit different.
Yeah. Well, you know how you get a Bama graduate off your front porch? You pay for the pizza. Man, John, I have had a good time today.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to doing this again. Anytime you got this number, you're welcome on this show anytime you want to be.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And just give me a holler whenever you throw your show up, and I'll give it a listen and I'll share it.
I definitely will.